Minister, can we start off just by asking you, you have taken this all the way through from almost beginning to end. How does it feel for you personally today to actually be signing the instrument to bring this into effect?
Well, I think it's a great personal achievement because, like always with pieces of legislation, it's great to see them on the statute book. And this one, given the fact that, you know, I was there for the start and I'm here for the finish, particularly, and also the fact that, you know, a number of other ministers were involved, Eamon O'Keefe and Brian Lenihan, in relation to the taxation and social welfare changes. So the fact that it's all coming together on the 1st of January is fantastic.
You've seen change in our society over the many years you've been in politics. Are you surprised with the ease in which this bill was brought in and saw its passage through both houses of the Oireachtas?
Well, I suppose, you know, Ireland has changed dramatically in the last 20 years. I mean, as a father of 2 girls, you know, I'm always there to be changed, and I think, you know, it's a life experience, life learning experience, particularly if you have children. You know, the attitudes that, you know, older generations had maybe quite different to the current. You know, I think it shows a maturing of Irish society, to be honest, and I think that's to be welcomed by everyone. And the fact that there has been no real reaction, you know, people might have thought there would be a reaction. I think it just shows you again how, you know, pluralist Ireland has become, and correctly so.
Not to take away from the importance and the positive nature of today, there are some people still who are unhappy with how far the legislation goes. Is there anything you would like to say to people who still have reservations?
Well, I think GLEN particularly adopted the correct attitude in that they achieved what was achievable up to a point, and obviously more work from you know, GLEN's point of view, but also from those people who are unhappy with where it is at the moment, that it doesn't go far enough. But they obviously have to continue lobbying and you know, obviously building on the changing nature of our society. And you know, there may come a time in the future where, you know, there will be an acceptance that we have to change our constitution, and it's only by changing our constitution will, you know, that issue of marriages be dealt with. It can only be dealt with, and that was the advice given to government by the Attorney General, and that will be no different until the constitution is changed.
This is probably one of the last pieces of legislation that you'll be signing off on before you move into your next phase of life. Does it have any particular significance for you being involved here today and taking part in this?
Well, once I made my announcement, I got an avalanche of best wishes from people, but the one that I was particularly happy with was from GLEN. They were the first out, and as always, they know all the right buttons to push. And yeah, it is an achievement. You know, I mean, I'm a legislator, and I've been lucky enough to put through quite significant pieces of legislation in the 4 senior ministries that I've had, but I would rank this one as probably one of the best and the most innovative and the most, I suppose, societal changing effect.
It's a historic day. Can you tell us just how historic this is?
Well, I suppose it's hard really to kind of to underestimate the importance of this occasion and this year for lesbians and gay men, because it has transformed and will continue to transform our lives in Ireland. It'll deliver a fantastic range of rights and responsibilities to lesbian and gay couples. It will give them great security, and I think it'll be a huge benefit for the families of lesbians and gay men, for brothers and sisters, for co-workers, for our society in general, that we now are a far more generous, confident and open society.
What's it been like getting this legislation to the point where it is now today being signed finally into action?
Well, it's been a roller coaster, I suppose, and I think we as chair of GLEN, I think I have to and I would really like to pay great tribute to the board of GLEN and to the staff in GLEN, because there were difficult times where we got quite a lot of criticism, I suppose, and it was a matter of holding our nerve in that, and I suppose especially for the people the full-time workers who perhaps got more negative response from people than I certainly would have in the kind of almost the ivory tower of Dublin City Council. But also I think we got huge support from many lesbian and gay organisations, from many lesbian and gay individuals, and they phoned in, they sent cards, they sent emails saying how important this was for them. And I think it's a fantastic thing that now, as Owen Collins keeps on saying, like a couple of years ago when people rang up and said, I have a partner from outside the EEA, what rights, what can I do to to give security to our relationship in Ireland, and we had nothing to offer them. Now we do, and that's fantastic.
For you personally, what does a day like today mean?
Well, I suppose it's a huge honour. It's a huge honour to be chair of GLEN and to be able to welcome the minister here, welcome the minister on behalf of lesbians and gay men throughout Ireland, and to acknowledge as well that the huge role that many people played in the development of the lesbian and gay movement in Ireland from way back in 73, 74, when the first lesbian and gay organisations were set up, the Irish Gay Rights Movement. Many of those people are no longer involved, and it would be terrible if they were forgotten. The people who had set up the organisations, who had run the discos, who had run the helplines, who had done all of that very hard work, and who rightly have moved on and into retirement, or a better phrase, I suppose, onto other aspects of their career. And we should acknowledge and celebrate all of that work. And also the huge thing about the lesbian and gay movement, one of the first things was about coming out. And I think you cannot underestimate the impact of thousands of people, unknown, anonymous, coming out to their family, to their friends, to their communities, to their workplaces, and the impact of that coming out having on achieving consciousness change in Irish society that allowed us to get this Civil Partnership Act through.
What's the next step for GLEN? Where are you focusing your energies now?
Well, GLEN has a very an equally ambitious programme for the next 4 to 5 years, and obviously there's a whole area of children, and we've had a very positive recommendations from the Law Reform Commission, interestingly, just yesterday. And the next, I suppose, most urgent legal task for GLEN is to move those recommendations into law, and again to build on that political and social consensus so that we can deliver that next step, that huge next step, to deliver the security to lesbian and gay couples and their children.
Can you tell us, how do you feel today, standing here after witnessing the signing?
Still slightly surprised, enormously delighted, elated. I really didn't think we were going to get there, in a sense, this quickly. It doesn't seem that long ago when people would ask me, well, are you going for marriage? And I said, well, actually no, because I'm damned if I'm going to campaign for a marriage in a state that doesn't have divorce. And that was part of the thing. And then suddenly it became such an important issue. And the energy was throughout the community and other organisations, campaigning for marriage ourselves, also campaigning for marriage. But to get this step going has been just wonderful. And people who complain that, oh, it's all taken so much time, I think in the context of civil rights, to go from a stage where we were criminals 17 years ago, and we have now got, I think, 13 pieces of legislation or codes of practice. I still think that there has in fact been a really serious movement in those 17 years. Almost every year there's been some new piece of legislation, some piece of importance on equality, on unfair dismissals legislation, the new immigration stuff that has come in, right back to the thing where all the public servants got anti-discrimination legislation. So it's it's not the end of it, but I feel this is an enormous step, and I feel very privileged to have been in the Dáil to see the decriminalisation, to see this in the Dáil and Senate, 2 enormous days, and here to see this thing being signed. Brilliant.
We are now in the first generation of young people who have reached the age of maturity, where they have lived their whole life being not being criminals.
Isn't it wonderful? I think it's astonishing. I mean, gradually they're beginning to cease to believe the fact that they were ever people were criminal. They like, it's talking as though we were in the Dark Ages, which we were, of course, in the Dark Ages, but it's still only 17, 18 years ago, and it's extraordinary. I find that people, women in particular, young women, are told that of a time not that long ago, which I perfectly remember, friends of mine who were sacked automatically if they got married, and they think that's absolutely not possible. And of course it was possible. And now we were criminals. It's gone. It's a whole new generation there, and the fact that they are getting increasingly angry and not putting up with any nonsense is very admirable. I'm all in favour of it.
What do you have to say about the Minister for Justice who brought this through?
Well, the Minister had a roughish reputation. You know, he was regarded as very combative and all the rest of it, and he wasn't the favourite Minister in the press or in various other areas. But in fact, I think he's been extraordinary, because he's extremely professional and very tenacious. And it was wonderful to see that when the objections were being made in the Senate by a variety of people on frankly entirely spurious grounds, which was recognised by virtually everybody, but the incisiveness with which he cut down nonsense arguments was wonderful to watch. And I thought, you know, he was the right minister at the right time. I can imagine a lot of ministers, because they're not wildly popular in his party, but once he saw the justice of it, carried it right through.
Can you explain to us what it was that we witnessed here today? What was this all about?
Certainly. Although the Act was passed and signed by the President back in July, it needs to be commenced, and the Minister needs to choose the date on which it is to be commenced. So the document that he signed here today was effectively the Commencement Order, that as and from, I believe, the 1st of January, the rules and regulations in the Act will now become law.
And who does that affect? Who? I mean, is it just government departments, or what happens?
No, it affects everybody. All the rights and responsibilities that flow from the legislation. People will be able to register their civil partnerships. In due course, foreign partnerships will be recognised. Cohabiting couples will have rights and responsibilities to each other. So all of those arrangements will effectively kick in from January 2011.
Do we know yet if everything is in place so that people from the 2nd of January will be able to go to a registry office and apply for a civil partnership?
Well, from my own personal experience, I do believe the registrars all around the country have geared up and are ready to, you know, take the onslaught, if you like, of civil registrations that are going to take place. And my understanding is that all the various departments would have seen this legislation in advance and would be working to make sure that everything is in place when it's commenced.
Fergus, can I come to you? You wrote the first kind of in-depth analysis of the bill when it was first published. Can you tell us what significant changes have taken place since the bill was first published, and what are they, what do they mean?
Well, the Act itself, conferred a wide variety of rights and obligations on civil partners and also on cohabiting couples. Some of the things that we were uncertain about at the time related to immigration, tax and social welfare. And since then, the immigration bill, which is going through the Dáil at the moment, will ensure, once it is passed, that married couples and civil partners will be treated the same. So the civil partners of Irish nationals nationals will effectively be treated the same as spouses of Irish nationals. It doesn't necessarily guarantee access to the country, but it means effectively that one can't be treated any differently from a spouse. The same in relation to tax and social welfare legislation that is going through the Dáil at the moment, and indeed a recently passed social welfare bill, effectively mean that civil partners will be treated the same as spouses for taxation purposes. Capital acquisitions tax will be an important tax in that regard. The whole area of inheritance, spouses are effectively exempt from tax in respect of donations that they receive, or indeed inheritances that they receive from their spouses. It will be the same for civil partners. And there are also a number of important extensions of the social welfare provisions. For the first time, effectively same-sex couples will be treated as and recognised as cohabiting couples for the purpose of the social welfare scheme. Now that may actually result in reductions in social welfare for some people, unfortunately. On the other hand, there will be a number of other social welfare benefits that will now be extended to civil partners, so that's a very important step forward. I should say as well that on Tuesday the Law Reform Commission recommended changes to the law in relation to children, and one of the recommendations that they made is in relation to the provision for extending guardianship or parental responsibility to the civil partners of parents. So where a couple decide that they will have a child together and they are civil partners, that the person who is not a biological parent may either apply to court or by agreement with existing guardians become responsible for that child as well. So that if it is implemented, will be another major step forward and would remedy, I think, one of the I suppose the major deficiencies in the Act. To the extent that there were deficiencies, I think in relation to children there's a wide agreement that the bill really should have dealt with children. However, the issue hopefully will be dealt with down the line. The Law Reform Commission prepared a draft bill for that purpose, and so that looks as if there will be significant progress there perhaps in the next few years.